Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the Alice Cooper Band box set of Muscle of Love. This is a deluxe edition of their 1973 album done in the original LP packaging of the cardboard box. It's a 3-disc set. It's put out by Rhino Records. It's an exclusive off of their website that just dropped on November 1st of 2024. I'm going to get into it here, break it all down, do a full review and unboxing of this thing. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you're never going to miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things just like this. Taking a look at this very awesome reproduction of the original Alice Cooper album, Muscle of Love, now as a 3-disc box set. So I'm going to jump back a little bit and give you guys some history, some context in terms of what we're going to talk about on this thing. So a lot of people don't actually know that the band formed in 1968. So yes, Alice Cooper Band is actually a band of the 60s who became very popular in the early 70s. But most people just kind of know them for their big hits and, 1973, Billion Dollar Babies, that whole sort of thing. Lineup for the band features Vincent Furnier on vocals, of course, taking the name as Alice Cooper. That's where the band gets its name, and ultimately Alice Cooper being solo and continuing on with that. But we also have Glenn Buxton on guitar, Michael Bruce on guitar, Dennis Dunaway on bass, and Neil Smith on drums. And so that lineup is the Alice Cooper Band version, who makes 7 albums together before Alice leaves to go solo. And it's that delineation there between the album, the final album, which is Muscle of Love, and Alice Cooper's start as a solo artist with Welcome to My Nightmare, that is the separation between band and artist. And so Alice Cooper Group is actually part of the glam rock scene of the very early 70s. And again, another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily associate with them, thinking of them more where they lean as the shock rock band that they were. Famously signed onto Frank Zappa's label for their first 2 albums. And they would later, of course, follow that up with 71's Leave It to Death. And this is where the band finally would break through, having a hit with I'm 18. And second album, 71, also Killer. This one here featuring 2 other mega hits on it, Under My Wheels and Be My Lover. And I always really like the song Dead Babies that's on that album. It's a killer cult classic style song. And when Alice Cooper performs that one live, I still go crazy for that. But 72 brought the band sort of their biggest success at that point with School's Out. Now that title track is really the only song that made it off this thing, but it's a big enough song. It still celebrates summer. We still love to hear it to this day. One of his, maybe even his biggest song. But it really is the next album, Billion Dollar Babies from 73, the first album of 73 that he would release, because Muscle Love follows it up also in 73. So this one here, though, goes to #1 in the US. It sells 1 million copies in the US. 4 major hits off of it: Elected, Hello Hooray, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and of course the title track, Billion Dollar Babies. But again, another killer cult classic on there, I Love the Dead. And just Alice always had some killer, deep cuts on his albums. One of the things I always loved about him and the band. But riding high on that success is where the band goes into the studio to make this album, which ultimately is their final album as the band. So that brings us here to what we want to talk about now. Muscle of Love, the 7th studio album from the band, 2nd of 1973. This one here, different in that it was not produced by Bob Ezrin, who had worked with the band on previous albums, and so a lot of that theatrical sound is gone. And I don't know that that's specifically related to Bob Ezrin, because the band did make a decision to return to a more straightforward rock approach than the theatrics that they had been doing. And this would become a theme going forward for Alice Cooper, the artist, who would constantly change sounds and styles on albums, moving with the times and things of that nature. And so that's something we're first really starting to see here, because it hadn't been that long since the band formed, releasing their debut album in 69. And then by 73, the band's breaking up. So over a short only about a 5-year period total for the band, they didn't have that long of a period to start making those changes. So we would start to see that later with Alice Cooper, the artist. But this album here, diverging from where they had been and going with a more straight ahead rock approach, which I think is why this album isn't talked about in as high a regard as Billion Dollar Babies or some of the other ones are. But this one here, I really like. Hard Hearted Alice is on here. Teenage Lament 74, that one, makes it onto the greatest hits. Muscle of Love, the title track, is killer. And then we've got another deep cut on here that I really like, Man with the Golden Gun, which was actually written for a James Bond film of the same name, but never used as the theme music to it. So it ends up on the album, and it's actually probably the most theatrical of the songs on here. But I always liked that song, didn't know that it was that until getting this album and reading about that in there. So, certainly the movie's loss was our gain, as fans getting it on this album. And it's not so wildly different like some of the James Bond theme songs that it can't appear on an Alice Cooper album. But it's a great album, and I think it's often overlooked, and I'm so glad that it is getting the deluxe edition treatment here from Rhino Records, and it's an exclusive to them. So this isn't available on Amazon, and you can't go to your local stores and get it unless the store chose to go and order. And I think there's a limited number they can order from the website. So it's not something you're probably going to find in your stores. So head over to Rhino, I believe it's just rhino.com, but Rhino Records. And this is a 3-disc set. It features 2 CDs. It's got a Blu-ray in it, and it's priced at $34.98. So killer replica packaging at $35. Shipping on it, but I don't think shipping was that much, around $5, give or take. I can't quite remember, but it wasn't too bad. And you get the original CD itself remastered. You get CD 2 with 11 previously unreleased tracks. As I mentioned, you get the Blu-ray in here with quadraphonic mixes. You get a book in here that's got 24 pages in it. And then you get this cool replica book cover sheet. So let's go ahead and open this thing up and start looking at that stuff and talk about it. So just like the original LP, it's cut out here, and it actually opens. They pre-punched it for us, so you're not going to destroy it when you open it. And it just pops like that, comes out, and there you go. But I want to show you guys, so the original, well, when I say original, but I mean the CD replicates it here, right? And it looks that way, and when we flip it over, we get that. But of course, it was coming from the original LP, so that's what this is. And the discoloration, the water damage, or whatever you want to call it, the staining, is intentional. If you don't know the original album, most of us will, but those of you that might be younger and saying, oh no, did you get a bad one? No, it's supposed to be that way. And I remember as a kid in the record store seeing the original LP versions of it and thinking, oh man, that's really beat up. But in fact, it was intended to be that way. All right, so anyways, on the back side here, we still have the track listing out of order, the way that it is on the CD or original LP. And then we just open it and it slides out like that. So I will let this stuff fall out into my hands, and we'll get this stuff here. The first thing up is the book cover. Now, some of you younger guys might not know about this, but those of us that are old enough where our teachers required us to protect our hard cover books, because those were often books that were then recycled out to the new students the next year. So you had to protect your books. So you had to go home and, cut paper. I used to just do it with a brown paper bag or something, but if you were very cool, you got to get decorative ones from the store or whatever. Well, Alice Cooper gave away this, and you would put this over the book and fold in the edges and protect it and everything. What it's also done as is a wrestling scorecard. So that's what it looks like. But I thought that was really cool that even that part of it was reproduced in here. As I mentioned, you get a 24-page booklet in here, nicely done, very thick. And it's just filled to the brim with information in here. So look how dense the text is. It's really kind of an immersive track by track commentary on the album with new interviews of the surviving members of the band. So 4 remaining guys in the band, minus Glenn Buxton, who obviously passed away, not part of this. But we get interviews with them talking about all the tracks. And the cool thing is, it also goes on to the second disc and talks about those alternate versions that make up the second disc. So it's not just talking about the album itself, it also talks about the bonus material. And that's kind of cool because oftentimes, a lot of times, they don't really cover the bonus material. So not a lot of photos. In fact, I was going to say, actually, I don't think, no photos on the inside. So just that. So we don't get a plethora of band photos. That might be my only complaint about this booklet, as I would have liked it to have been more photos and things of that nature in here. But what we do get is replica of the sleeve, which was two-sided, where you had the morning version of the band shown in the sailor's outfits, and then the evening version coming in, or I don't know, is that the evening, and then the next morning, however it's thought of, coming out, and they're wasted and they're being arrested by the MPs and that kind of thing. But you get that, and then you flip those over and it's got the track listing. So we got the original 9-track album in this sleeve, and we've got the 11 unreleased songs, or versions. It really is. It's not unreleased songs, but unreleased versions on this disc. And those unreleased versions follow the same track listing as the original albums. You get those 9, and then tacked onto the end, we get 2 single versions of songs. We get Teenage Limit 74 and Muscle of Love. Makes sense. And out of these alternate versions, early versions, alternate mixes, there's an acoustic version on here. And the sound quality is excellent, by the way. So Alice has released some stuff that's a little questionable, scraping the bottom of the barrel with like old school. That was very early stuff, and I get that. This here, you don't have to worry about it. It sounds fantastic. But the songs themselves, those alternate versions, are only subtly different. There's not a wild difference to them, maybe lacking a bit in energy, a bit more raw. But I'm pretty married to the original one, so it's cool to hear, but it's not so different that it's going to shed any new light on the overall album, hearing it in a different way or anything of that nature. So, it's kind of really for diehards in terms of those extra tracks that are added in. And then you get the Blu-ray itself in this sleeve, which replicates the Muscle of Love main cover. But what's interesting is, while these are in kind of very thin paper sleeves, they're not thick at all, the Blu-ray itself is in some nice cardstock and has a much better appearance to it than the CDs. And I don't know why they spent more to do that. None of them come with protective coverings on the discs, so why spend more money on that aspect than you are on the CD? I think they all should have come in the thicker cardstock, and so that would maybe be my only complaint overall on this, is that they kind of cheaped out on the paper sleeves of the CDs. But then, we talked about it already, the price of this, $35, $34.98, keeps that cost way down when this would normally be a lot more expensive. So that Blu-ray with the quadraphonic mixes, making their debut on Blu-ray here. And so the overall packaging of this, I just think is super cool, right? Just go back to that original cardboard sleeve. I mean, look at me. I got a smile on my face. And I had this when I opened this up last night when this came in, I was grinning from ear to ear on it. And so despite this not really having any, I don't know, groundbreaking unreleased material or anything like that, I'm still very quite happy with it. And so, yeah, I guess bottom line on this thing, I think at the price at $35 It's totally worth it just for the packaging alone. The bonus material isn't going to change your life or shed some new light on this album after 51 years. But I do think it's cool to hear, and it sort of speaks to why wasn't this album released in 2023 to celebrate a proper 50th anniversary? I don't know. We've been seeing that a lot lately. Maybe it just wasn't the right time with Alice releasing his own studio album and they didn't want it to overlap. I don't know. But I do think Rhino Records has done it right. They've done custom packaging. The contents on it are great, reproducing the original, book cover, plus the booklet that has new information in it and a lot of content to really read and digest and understand. But they do it for the right cost, because a box set like this released through the stores would easily have been $50, if not greater. But here it is for $35. And so I think the whole thing is done right. I've recommended it to the hardcore fans. I don't think if you're a new Alice fan, you have to go this route. But if you've never checked out Muscle of Love, because it doesn't have the big radio hits and stuff like it, I think it's a fantastic album. It's a personal favorite of mine that I go to all the time because it's not worn out. And I hope that this release here, this deluxe edition, shines a bit more light on this fantastic album that I think often gets overlooked. All right, everyone, there you go. That is my review and unboxing for Alice Cooper's Muscle of Love, the seventh and final Alice Cooper Band album from 1973, now getting a deluxe edition treatment. So take care, everyone. Have a good one. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you think this is also an underrated album. And let me know if you're going to choose to pick it up or not. All right, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.